Good morning. It could be afternoon, who knows. My name's Andy Young and I'm one of the lecturers down at Unitec in Auckland, New Zealand, and I teach automotive, and during the year I like to produce videos which I can then use within my lectures to help cover the course content for my students and allow them to see me operating in a working environment and to see real world diagnostics, problems and of course repairs. Now this particular vehicle behind me is a Yamaha Viking. It's one of the 2013 vintage, and it lives on one of the islands just away from Auckland. I'm not going to tell you which one. And it works on a farm, and it's, like I say, it's only about 18 months old. It's been worked extremely hard, and the diagnostics so far, it's got a suspected blown head gasket. It could be a cracked head, it could be a cracked barrel. Essentially there's overheating going on, it's losing water. The primary fail, we believe, was the thermostat. Something very simple. The thermostat had failed, and it had failed to open one day. The operator of the vehicle unfortunately didn't notice that the engine was overheating and continued to drive it with the engine beyond its normal running temperature, which has caused, I feel, the head gasket to fail. Now the vehicle has travelled quite a distance to my workshop because there was nobody in Auckland prepared to work on it. So I took up the challenge, and now it isn't just an engine repair job. We've got a full service and overhaul to do on the vehicle. We've got brakes to check, and overhaul, wheel bearings and that kind of stuff. But the main task is, of course, the engine repair. And to aid the filming, so you can really see what's going on and to make these videos a bit more comprehensive, we're going to, or I'm going to include an engine removal and refitment to this vehicle. And we're going to do the actual engine strip down, the top end strip down inspection on the bench. Now, in a real world environment, in a workshop, to do a replacement head gasket on this particular vehicle, we do not need to remove the engine. All that work can be done in situ, but it's going to make it much easier to film and for you to see what's really going on. So here we go. We're going to make a start. We're going to pull off the rear tray. That will gain access to the engine. We've got rear wheels to take off, drive shafts to take out, a lot of engine mounts, wiring and stuff, drain the coolant, and then we can get the engine taken out. It's going to be a very stop-start kind of video. There's lots of work to do. One thing that's absolutely imperative when doing this kind of work is to ensure that you have the manufacturer's workshop manual for the vehicle that you're working on. There's going to be heaps of nuts and bolts that we're going to be pulling, undoing and then retightening again later on, and we need to know torque settings for that. You can't do up head bolts without knowing a torque setting. You know, you could over crush the head gasket, which could pull the threads on the bolts. They're only into aluminium. If we don't tighten those bolts up tight enough, then of course the head gasket could fail again. We need to know specifications too. When we're checking to see if the head on that engine has warped, we need to know what's specification, or what's the tolerance, what can it be up to when we measure that. There's a lot of stuff that we need to know, and really you shouldn't be doing a job like this until you've been able to source the relevant information. Now, the World Wide Web, somebody out there has probably uploaded one of these manuals. I have what I need. I have contacts at Yamaha, which is very helpful for me. I actually work for Yamaha some days. What I can't do for copyright purposes is show you the manual. What I can do is, as I'm going through the job, is to tell you the torque settings. So you'll find in this video, on the engine rebuild, certainly the strip down and rebuild, I will cover all torque specifications for the bolts as we go through the video, and that is critical. You'll need that information to do this job. Okay, just a quick tip. When you come to wash your engine off, it's really important that you block off any inlets, outlets, wherever pipes went, which really don't want any water or dirt going into them. Now, I've left the coolant pipe ones open because it was full of water anyway, and it won't harm to get any water in there, so I'll leave those alone. But this is the way that you, a real simple way of blocking them off. I've just found some nice thick plastic and some cable ties, cut the plastic down and just put the plastic over each, that's the intake there, look, over each of the places that I don't want any water to go in. This is where the belt drive cooling air goes in. We've got some more on the side here as well. We really don't want to contaminate any of that. We're not going to be stripping that down. All we're stripping down on this particular job is the head and the barrel of the engine. I want to have a look at the piston as well and check all that, so the barrel's going to come off. So a really inexpensive, easy way of making sure we don't contaminate any of the areas or any of the inlets on the engine which we don't want any dirty water to go into, because pressure washers are really good at blasting water into places we don't want. So Ben's going to go off now and give this engine a really good wash, and then we'll get it on the bench and we'll make a start stripping it down. Okay, so we've washed off the engine, or Ben has, and I'm just draining the oil out before we put it up on the workbench. And you can see that the oil shouldn't be that colour at all. That's brown. Oil should be black or a golden brown colour when it's new. This oil is heavily contaminated, and it's been that water getting through the head gasket into the cylinder that's contaminated this oil now. When water gets into the oil, it reduces the oil's ability to lubricate. So when we get the cylinder head taken off, we might actually find that there's some damage, some scoring to the cylinder wall and the piston and the rings, and if we do, then it's not only going to be a head gasket job, we're also going to have to get a rebore done with new piston and rings, or a replacement barrel if the barrel's cracked or severely scored. So when you see something like this coming out of your engine oil, coming out of your sump, then it's another telltale sign that there's further problems down the line. And with this vehicle only being a year and a half old, it's going to have to leave this workshop in good order. So everything that needs to be done to get this engine back to original spec and running properly will be done. There's it's a guaranteed fix. You know, everything that needs to be done will get done. We've also spotted on the casing here a crack. Now, given the harsh environment that this vehicle works in, that crack is going to allow moisture to get into the drive belt, which is inside this casing here. Now, if there's moisture getting in there, that's going to cause the drive belt to slip on the CVT pulleys. So again, I'll pull that cover off at some point and inspect the condition of that drive belt. It may well be that we're going to have to replace that as well. So things are looking quite bad for this engine at the moment. It's a really good job that we pulled it out of the frame, especially given issues like this. It's going to be much easier to inspect and repair the CVT drive with the engine outside the vehicle, given the fact we had to also give the vehicle a really good wash. It means that I can get on and get this engine stripped and inspected whilst Ben gets the chassis all cleaned up nicely for later on. We're looking probably about a week's delay before we get all the parts. This is quite a major job now. Okay, so here we go. The engine is out. We've washed it all off. I've taken all the protective covers we put on there, stop water getting in while we cleaned it off. I'm now going to strip down the top end, we call it. It's the head. Get the head taken off, take the timing chain off and so on, and then we're going to inspect the internals. Now, based on what we saw with the condition of the oil, there's a very good chance we're going to find some scoring, some poor lubrication issues within this engine, and the extent of the damage is going to dictate just how many parts we're going to have to replace. This is turning out to be quite a large job, unfortunately. It seems that they've been topping up the coolant system with water for a very long time. This head gasket issue, if that's what it is, this cooling system issue, should have been addressed many months ago. Instead, they just continue to use it, continue to top up the water, and as a result, that's diluted down the oil, which is going to cause many, many more problems inside this engine, potentially. So we'll get it stripped down, and we'll see where we go from there. So I'm just taking the rocket covers off for now, and then we'll attack the timing chain, slacken off the tensioner, remove the external oil pipe. That's the one that supplies pressurised oil from the oil pump up to the head to lubricate the camshaft. It's the first time I've stripped down a Viking engine actually, so we'll see how it goes. Ooh, it's not looking very nice in there. Yeah. Okay, external oil pipe. So if you get with these external oil pipes, there's always going to be little copper washers on those banjo fittings, and they need to be replaced during assembly, and of course we'll be covering that later on. Two larger banjo bolt fittings down the bottom for the oil, for this external oil pipe. There we go, that's that one out. All the seals taken off. The last thing you want is to put two washers, one old one and one new one on. It's always best to make sure you've got all these out of the way when you're stripping it down. There we go. Put those on the banjo bolts. Put everything that's relative together. I usually use a bit of cardboard because then I can write on it as well if I need to. Okay, I'm now going to just remove the timing covers because we'll need those off for later on. Number 8 anyway, let's find out. Oh, there we go, look. 1, 10. It's always good to double check the timing of the engine before you take off the cam chain. You never know who else has been in it in the past. Never take things for granted, as it may well be that they've put the thing back together wrong. Remember, this engine had a problem of overheating, and if somebody set the valve timing wrong, got it one tooth out on the cam chain, that can cause an engine to run extremely hot. So again, that could be another problem. I don't know the history of this vehicle, other than they bought it from new. They do some of their own maintenance themselves. I can't see why they would do something as serious as strip the engine down or change the cam chain timing, but it's always good, prudent to check, you know, as you're working your way and stripping the engine down, because then that way you see the full story. If you don't know the full story, it makes it difficult to diagnose and know exactly what the problem was in the past. Yeah, I'm seeing that's a classic case. You see it's all milky in there. Well, that's the water in the engine oil, and you'll get exactly the same for an oil filler on a rocker cover on a car. A clear indication that there's moisture in the oil, in the engine oil, and obviously 9 times out of 10 that's down to head gasket failures. If you ever see that kind of residue in any kind of oil cap or breather, whatever it is, then you know straight away there's a major problem with this engine. Okay. Right, now we can take out the tensioner for the cam chain. I'm just going to check the engine timing first. Now to do that, you need a bigger socket. Oh yeah, we're in lock. So I'm just going to rotate and check the timing marks are all correct before I strip off that cam chain tensioner. There we go. So, yep, so the time is correct. Inside here we've got a little mark on the flywheel with a letter H next to it. That's aligned with a groove on the casing. And on the camshaft sprocket, we've got again a straight line, a little groove etched into the sprocket, and on the casing we've got a notch here. And everything's in line. So the valve timing on this engine was correct. So that wasn't a contributing factor as to why the engine originally overheated. The customer has told me that they replaced the thermostat on this vehicle in the past. Very easy job. The thermostat's located just in this housing here. So, you know, a 5-minute job, but you can actually see that there's been some marks and sockets on there. So they've definitely done that. Was it correctly diagnosed? I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't have the old thermostat to test. Maybe he can send it over to me and I can do that. It's always good to know the full story. Okay, so the next job, before we can remove the cam chain, is we need to take the tension off the cam chain itself. And so this is the cam chain tensioner. But all we need to do, we'll crack that off while we're on. Yeah. Always a good idea to slacken that off, ready for when we reassemble the engine later on. Makes it a lot easier. Now remember, these things are spring loaded, so don't fully undo the bolts. We give it a little tap. Magic hammer. There'll be all new gaskets going on here, so that's all good. And you can see now it's sprung loaded out. Get those taken out. Not concerned about gaskets at all. We're going to be fitting new gaskets throughout. It's all part of the job. Make sure you release the tension, hold the unit back while you're getting the bolts out. You don't want to damage those threads. And there's your cam chain tensioner. And to adjust that, underneath this cover here, well, there's your spring. Okay, yeah, okay, that's cool. Made a mess. All right, put that in there, put the bolts back through so we know where they go. And that's there for later on. Try and work clean. I say that, doesn't always work. Okay. So cam chain tension now gone. We're going to need to, at some point, flick the cam chain off that sprocket. You can do that now, I suppose. We might have to take the sprocket off. I think we might have to. That's going to be those 2 bolts there. 10mm. Okay. So 1, 2. Easy. When replacing these bolts, hang on, did the wrong one there. When putting these bolts back in again, they need to be thread locked, most definitely. So I'll be doing all those anyway. The whole thing's going to get stripped down and cleaned. I'm not concerned about that at the moment. Okay, so cam chain sprocket should now, there we go. Chop them off. Remember, I've not done one of these engines before. I've done XT660s. Drop that down there, we don't need that, let them disappear. And there's your sprocket. Okay, cam chain top sprocket. Put that there with the bolts. Okay, so now the crankshaft is disconnected from the camshaft. What we do not want to do now is rotate either independently, which they will do now the cam chain's off, because then you risk the valves hitting the piston. We don't want to be bending any valves. So next job is to remove all the small bolts, and then finally the head bolts, then we can pull the head off. Okay. There we go. Now we're going to be taking the barrel off as well, so just while I'm on cracking these off, I don't want to leave the other ones in place as well, so I'll just crack those off just so that they're slack. I don't want them under tension when we undo the head bolts. These head bolts may go all the way down, looks like there's some there actually, so we may be okay, but I'll just crack those off. It's not going to do them any good if we undo the major bolts and leave these little ones in place. It's going to overstress the threads, and we do not want to risk losing any threads. Okay, so we've got 2, 4, and 1 round here, and 1 round the front. So we'll do those front 2 first. 12, maybe a 14, 12, there we go. So I always undo all the small bolts first for the head, get those out of the way, and then finish with the main head bolts. Some of these bolts are quite slack. That was nowhere near as tight as I would have expected it to be. Okay. Right, we can now do the head bolts. Now when you're slacking these off, you should do them in a crisscross pattern, just like with your wheel nuts on your car. We don't want to risk warping that head any more than what it already is. It's not as important with a single cylinder, but even so, if you get into a good habit, there we go. That one. One more to go. Fantastic. Okay, so head bolts coming out. Again, be aware these could all be different lengths. Now, because I've got the original Yamaha manual, I can look at that and that'll tell me the length of the bolts. You guys probably won't have that. So it is important to spot different length bolts when you lay them out on your cardboard on your bench. Make sure you make a note of which one goes where. These are obviously going to be longer ones. He says, yes they are, so the cam chain side ones are a little bit longer. And I'm putting that in the tray to suit. Okay, good, easy. Right, as far as I'm aware, that should be all the bolts out. And we'll bit of a tidy up, and then we'll be able to remove that head off the barrel. Like I say, it's always good to keep tidying up after yourself, otherwise it becomes a bit of a mess. Okay, right, that's your camera. There we go. Just crack off the gasket. There we go. One head. Okay, 4 valves, it's nice. Sometimes Yamahas are a 5 valve engine. And the cylinder, I can see that or not, but the cylinder is actually full of water. Can you see that in there? There you go, look. Absolutely full of water, which is not good at all. And again, a good indication that we've got head gaskets failing. Now I'm going to have a bit of a clean up and we'll see whereabouts on that head gasket it's failed. Or at least have a look and see if we can spot it. It's not always able to spot those kind of things. The break in the head gasket, when we split the head off the barrel, that damages the gasket in itself. But there's obviously a major failing of the head gasket. I can clean it there rather than the water though. Okay. Now, just while we're on, these dowels here are extremely important. They help to align the new gasket. They also align the head to the barrel exactly. Head bolts don't do that. So you'll be very careful with these things. Try not to lose them. I always take them out of the head carefully. There we go. And I make sure that they're all usually in the barrel themselves. And the reason for that is when we build the whole thing up, there we go. When we build the whole thing up, we need to hold that head gasket in place, and we put the head gasket on the barrel and then the head goes down on top. What we're looking for is breakage in the gasket. You can see here we've got the coolant, we've got the coolant chambers here, look. One here, small one there. 3 little tiny passageways here, allowing that coolant to circulate up into the head. And looking at that gasket, there is a bonding agent on here, which is this black stuff. So when the engine's built and run up to temperature, this black material here helps to seal the whole thing together. And normally I'd expect that gasket, you have to pull the gasket off. And as you can see, it's already loose. Now remember, some of the head bolts didn't appear to be as tight as I was hoping. The main ones were, but these additional ones here, front and rear, this one especially was very slack. And if you look, you can see some discoloration as well on the gasket. So, and there is actually what appears to be, get the camera a bit closer for you. There we go. we're going to be taking the barrel off as well. So just while I'm on cracking these off, I don't want to leave the other ones in place as well. So I'll just crack those off just so that they're slack. I don't want them under tension when we undo the head bolts. These head bolts may go all the way down. Looks like there's some there actually, so we may be okay. But I'll just crack those off. It's not going to do them any good if we undo the major bolts and leave these little ones in place. It's going to overstress the threads, and we do not want to risk losing any threads. Okay, so we've got 2, 4, and 1 round here, and 1 round the front. So we'll do those front 2 first. 12, maybe a 14, 12. There we go. So I always undo all the small bolts first for the head, get those out of the way, and then finish with the main head bolts. Some of these bolts are quite slack. That was nowhere near as tight as I would have expected it to be. Okay. Right, you can now do the head bolts. Now when you're slacking these off, you should do them in a crisscross pattern, just like with your wheel nuts on your car. We don't want to risk warping that head any more than what it already is. It's not as important with a single cylinder. But even so, if you get into a good habit, there we go, that one, one more to go. Fantastic. What have you found now? Well, hang on, let me just finish filming. Okay, so head bolts coming out. Again, be aware these could all be different lengths. Now, because I've got the original Yamaha manual, I can look at that and that'll tell me the length of the bolts. You guys probably won't have that. So it is important if you spot different length bolts when you lay them out on your cardboard on your bench, make sure you make a note of which one goes where. These are obviously going to be longer ones. He says, yes they are, so the cam chain side ones are a little bit longer. And I'm putting that in the tray to suit. Okay. Good. Easy. Right, as far as I'm aware, that should be all the bolts out. And so we'll a bit of a tidy up and then we'll be able to remove that head off the barrel. Like I say, it's always good to keep tidying up after yourself, otherwise it becomes a bit of a mess. Okay, right, that's your camera. There we go. Just crack off the gasket. There we go. One head. Okay, 4 valves, it's nice. Sometimes Yamahas are a 5 valve engine. And the cylinder, you can see that or not, but the cylinder is actually full of water. Can you see that in there? There you go, look. Absolutely full of water, which is not good at all. And again, a good indication that we've got head gaskets failing. Now I'm going to have a bit of a clean up and we'll see whereabouts on that head gasket it's failed. Or at least have a look and see if we can spot it. It's not always able to spot those kind of things. The break in the head gasket, when we split the head off the barrel, that damages the gasket in itself. But there's obviously a major failing of the head gasket. Actually clean it there rather than the water there. Okay. Now, just while we're on, these dowels here are extremely important. They help to align the new gasket. They also align the head to the barrel exactly. Head bolts don't do that. So you'll be very careful with these things. Try not to lose them. I always take them out of the head carefully. There we go. And I make sure that they're all usually in the barrel themselves. And the reason for that is when we build the whole thing up, there we go. When we build the whole thing up, we need to hold that head gasket in place, and we put the head gasket on the barrel and then the head goes down on top. Okay. Have a little look, see what we've got. Get rid of that head for now. Stick it on its side so it drains all that nasty oil out, what's left of it. Get rid of that. Cool. Okay. See if you can see that. It's not easy filming at the same time. There we go. Right, what have we got? Well, what we're looking for is breakage in the gasket. You can see here we've got the coolant, sorry, we've got the coolant chambers here, look. One here, small one there. Three little tiny passageways here, allowing that coolant to circulate up into the head and out, or whichever direction it goes in. It's allowing it to circulate. And looking at that gasket, there is a bonding agent on here, which is this black stuff. So when the engine's built and run up to temperature, this black material here helps to seal the whole thing together. And normally I'd expect that gasket, you have to pull the gasket off. And as you can see, it's already loose. Now remember, some of the head bolts didn't appear to be as tight as I was hoping. The main ones were, but these additional ones here, front and rear, this one especially was very slack. And if you look, you can see some discoloration as well on the gasket. So, and there is actually what appears to be, get the camera a bit closer for you. Okay, so looking at the head gasket in more detail, and you can see I've mopped out a lot of the water out of the cylinder. But can you see what I've noticed? Can you see here on the head gasket? There, look, we've got a change in its radius. It's got a dent in it essentially. Now that might be caused by heat distortion, you know, overheating. Remember, this engine's been overheated and cooled a number of times. It's my opinion that the head gasket has failed in this area here, and it was this bolt here that was too slack. It was very loose actually. Now it's obviously there for a reason. There is insufficient tension between the two main head bolts, which are these two here. It's quite a long distance, and that's what that bolt's there for, to keep the tension. And that bolt was loose. Well, I say loose, it wasn't finger tight, but it was nowhere near torqued to what it should have been. And that's caused the head gasket to fail around this area here. So coolant has been pressurizing in the coolant system, as it should do. And then the pressure has forced the coolant through into the cylinder. It's been leaking through, and I think that's what's caused this indent in the gasket here. It's certainly not bonded at all to the barrel. Normally, if you look around this side, see it's all stuck down. You know, there you go. So that's the gasket off, and you can see we've got here some discoloration on top of there, which I think there's been water flow from there into the cylinder, you know. So definitely a head gasket failure. We need to pull the barrel off, clean the barrel up, inspect everything for any kind of cracks and so on. Same goes with the head. I need to have a real thorough check of the head. We'll get it pressure tested as well to make sure that the head isn't cracked anywhere. That can be caused because it's been overheated. And I can make a parts list, get all these parts ordered from Yamaha. So there you go. That's the head off. Let's do the barrel. Okay, so we've got the head off. We've done a little inspection of the head gasket. We found that the head gasket had delaminated off the barrel. It wasn't bonded anymore. But we'll take a closer look at the head gasket itself a bit later on, see if we can find any more telltale signs as to where it's been leaking. To tally with this area here. But I think the primary failure was potentially the thermostat, but I don't have the old thermostat to test. Or this bolt here, clamping the head gasket down in this area, which was very loose, nowhere near sufficient torque as it should have been, could well have been the reason for this failure. Now that head bolt may have come loose due to expansion and contraction, overheating of the engine, which would lead me to believe that it's the thermostat that's caused the primary failure. Or, and we'll never know, when this engine was built in the factory, maybe that bolt wasn't torqued up sufficiently, but nobody knows. Okay, now barrel off time. We've got 4 more large bolts here. I've already slackened off these 2 small ones. We'll get those out of the way. Quite long. Okay, so remember those in the tray. Now these are a 14. And again, it's always good to crack them off diagonally. Wow, that's tight, Ben. There we go, that's 1. 2. 3. 4. Cool. Can you see if we've got another container? Oh, I think we had a plastic one. Let's have a look over there for us. On that far bench down there, I think there was a plastic container that I rescued and cleaned out. It had some stuff in it. Okay, what have we got? Those 2 are the same length. And, great, okay. These, all the same length, fantastic. Oh, that'll be that one. Right. Now, there we are, we can pull that out. Get that out of the way. Plastic, that one's normally locked in down the bottom, so we can't do anything with that. And again, just a little gentle tap should free that. There we are. Gasket in the way, really. Finger. Okay, 1 barrel off. face gasket, which wasn't leaking, off. Yeah, it's not a pretty sight, but there's no signs of any overheating in there, which is a bit of a bonus. Usually it's the big end that will go first. It will show signs of discoloration and sort of rainbowing on the web of the crank. So what we've done so far, just to recap, is the vehicle came in and with a suspected head gasket failure. We knew the engine was overheating, we knew it was using water. We did a coolant system pressure test. So pressurised the coolant system to try and find where the leak was. If the leak was external, then we'd see water rushing down out of one of the pipes onto the floor. We didn't see that, which told us that the leak, and we could see the pressure dropping in the system, the leak must have been an internal leak, internal as in inside the engine somewhere. We allowed the pressure to drop, which meant that the water out of the cooling system, and it was only water, not coolant at the moment, was then forced into wherever the fail was. We then removed the spark plug on the engine. We didn't want to crank the engine over with the spark plug in place because that, if the water had gone into the cylinder, that would cause the engine to hydraulic and it would cause damage to the conrod. Could potentially bend the conrod. So we took the spark plug out, we cranked the engine over, and as you saw on the camera, there was heaps of water came out. Yeah, okay. Lots of water. We then removed the engine from the vehicle, and that in itself was a major task. Initially it seemed pretty easy, and then for some reason Yamaha had really made the engine mountings very, very difficult to get to. And there was some additional harness wires from the stator and the ignition pickup. You'd call it a crank angle sensor for a car. We had to get to those and unplug those, which meant taking out all the front seats, meant taking out the airbox. We could then unplug those. Then we had the front drive shaft to disconnect. So again, that was fortunately the airbox was already out. And then we battled our way to undoing all the engine mounting bolts. With the aid of the engine hoist, we were able to jiggle the engine forward slightly to get the rear drive shaft uncoupled from the gearbox, and then we could get the engine out, get everything sealed up, get it pressure washed, get it up on the bench, and then finally do a top end strip down. If we knew that this was only a head gasket, then yes, it could be done in situ. No problem, it could be done. It's a bit awkward. It's a lot quicker, I'm sure. Risk of contamination is a lot higher, but given the fact that the engine had overheated and this problem has been going on for so long and they keep topping up the water, I really wanted the engine out on the bench to aid filming for you guys, and also so I could do a proper check. I'm a little bit concerned about the discoloration around the big end bearing on the crank webs, the pin, and the crank pin. I'm going to speak to Yamaha about that and see if it's normal, if it's a manufacturing process for these, or whether it shouldn't have that discoloration. My gut feeling is it has overheated. It's been driven hot. I know that this farm on the island, they travel all over the place using this vehicle, and it may well be that one of the farm hands has decided to continue to drive knowing that the engine was hot, and that would cause that kind of discoloration. The bearing, however, the big end bearing is smooth and there's no play, so it may well be that the customer decides not to put a new crank in it. It's going to be a much bigger job to do that. It's probably going to triple the expense of the repair. It may well be put it back together, and if it does blow the big end at some point in the future, then you're going to get it back and have to do all the work all over again. It's a very current vehicle. These Yamaha Vikings have only been around for a couple of years, so I expect this video to be extremely helpful to a great number of people over a long period of time. It's great to have this opportunity to work on something that's so new, and yeah, I hope you found it really helpful. And in the second video, the rebuild video for the engine, I'll cover all the torque specifications for all the bolts and everything as well, so that really it'll be like a visual manual for you. and I produce these videos primarily for my students. They can see me doing jobs. I don't get the chance to do this kind of thing at Unitec. We're too busy just doing the course. And but I also feel that putting these videos onto YouTube for you guys is an invaluable resource. Okay, thanks for watching. My name's Andy Young. I am one of the lecturers down at Unitec in Auckland. I teach automotive.